My name is Margaret, and I was 34 when I understood that 9 years of holding something together could be released with a single breath. Not with a shout. Oh, not with a slammed door. With a manila envelope, a notary stamp, and a filing date that had already passed while they were still choosing their ties. I want to be clear about what this story is. It is not a revenge fantasy. There are no poisoned prescriptions, no burned labels lit for spectacle, no cinematic monologue delivered to yours. It is the sound of a machine stopping because one person stopped oiling it. The machine in this case was a family. My family. My duo. They ran a neighborhood pharmacy, Chen Family Drugs, 3 blocks from the hospital, held in an LLC that bore my brother's name like a vanity plate on a car he had not paid for. For 9 years, I had been the one who verified the prescriptions, balanced the inventory, trained the technicians, and kept the DEA log. My brother Jason held the title of proprietor. I held a Doctor of Pharmacy degree and a state license I had earned 8 years earlier. Credentials his name could not legally carry because he had never passed the exam. They knew this. They had known it for years. What they did not know was that I had already filed a change of pharmacist in charge with the state board. The form was dated February 14th. The compliance audit was scheduled for March 15th. And on March 12th, my family invited a buyer to tour the pharmacy over brunch, hoping to sell a $12,000 monthly contract they had not earned without me. I was invited too. They thought I was coming to arrange the pastries. Visual: a library display board, a blue ribbon, a boy's new bicycle. I was 12 the first time I understood that my hands were useful to them in a way my voice was not. The summer I turned 12, the county library held its first youth science fair, and my parents entered Jason, who was 14, and had never looked through a microscope without complaining, because they said the fair was good for the pharmacy's profile. I spent 3 nights in our kitchen after closing, perfecting a display on pharmacology that showed how aspirin moved through the bloodstream, with hand-drawn diagrams and a model made from clay and food coloring. Jason watched a basketball game while I glued the last label. On the day of the judging, I carried the board to the library in a cardboard box, still smelling of glue, the weight of it making red marks on my forearms. My mother patted my knee and said I was her little helper, that she didn't know what they would do without me. At the judging table, the organizer asked who had designed the entry. My father stepped forward and said Jason had developed the concept, that he was learning the family business, that his son had a real head for science. Jason stood beside him in a clean shirt, smiling at the judges, while I was sent to the back to organize the display table. The project won a $200 prize. Jason accepted it with a speech about curiosity and tradition that he had rehearsed in the car. That night, the $200 bought Jason a new bicycle, a red 10-speed with curved handlebars. I received a $10 bill and a pat on the head. I did not cry in front of them. In the pharmacy stockroom, surrounded by bottles of ibuprofen, because my mother had said, Margaret's always been our foundation. Why would we change that? She said it while counting the register, not looking up the way you note that the dishwasher is running or that the mail has come. I was useful. I was not worth a ribbon. You. Visual: a kitchen table, a shoebox of receipts, a calculator. I was 17 when I found the $3,800 deduction. My father had bought a new automated pill counter that fall, a machine with a digital readout and a barcode scanner. And he was drowning in receipts he had shoved into a shoebox labeled taxes in black marker. The box sat on the kitchen table for 3 weeks. I organized them alphabetically, then chronologically, then found the Section 179 deduction he had forgotten to file for the new equipment and the energy rebate from the November utility audit. $3,800. That was the exact difference between my father owing the IRS $1,500 and getting a refund of $2,300 that spring. He clapped me on the shoulder at dinner and told my mother I had a real head for business, that I was a natural. I asked if I could be added to the business checking account so I could pay the wholesaler invoices directly instead of waiting 3 days for him to find his checkbook and sign every bill. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "Margaret's always been our foundation," she said. "Jason needs to learn the financial side for his business degree. Why would we change that?" I looked at my father. He was already talking to Jason about his batting average. The $3,800 saved the pharmacy that year. It paid for Jason's summer baseball camp. My name did not appear on a single document, not the LLC filing, not the bank account, not the equipment lease. I was useful. I was not worth a signature. Visual: a pharmacy diploma, a train ticket, a crossed-out date. I graduated from pharmacy school at 25 with a Doctor of Pharmacy degree and an offer to complete a residency at a hospital in the city, 40 minutes north by train. The same week, my mother had a bad turn with her blood pressure. Nothing catastrophic, the doctor said, but she needed to reduce stress and avoid early mornings and heavy lifting. My father called me into the kitchen the Sunday after her release and said the pharmacy needed a manager, just for now, just until my mother was back on her feet and feeling like herself again. Jason was 27, working at a pharmaceutical sales firm across town, building his client portfolio. As my mother put it, her voice lifting on the word portfolio, like it was a fragile thing that needed protection. He was too busy. I was not too busy. I was available. Right. That was the word she used. Available. As if I were a conference room. As if I had no edges. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, the one with the faded wallpaper, and the desk that still had my high school graduation program in the drawer. I took the train 40 minutes each way to my hospital shifts and handled the pharmacy at night, sitting on the edge of my bed with a laptop that overheated and a phone that rang until 11. I verified prescriptions. I managed inventory. I fixed the automated counter at midnight with a YouTube video and a screwdriver I bought myself because the maintenance budget my father set was imaginary. For 9 years, this was the rhythm. 9 years. I want you to hold that number. 3,285 days, more or less, of being the one who answered the phone when a patient needed an emergency refill at 2 in the morning, who drove to the pharmacy in ice storms to check the refrigeration because my father couldn't lift the sandbags, who learned the state pharmacy codes by heart because no one else would read them. The personal cost was not the labor I could do in my sleep by year 4. The cost was the life I did not build while I was oiling the machine. Visual: a studio apartment listing, a red pen crossing out a date. At 26, I had saved $5,000 and found a studio apartment 2 blocks from the hospital, with a window that faced east and a radiator that clanked but worked. I gave notice at home. I packed 2 suitcases. My mother cried. No. Not hard, not with noise, just enough to make the air in the kitchen feel heavy and wet, the way it feels before a summer storm. She said my father still wasn't strong enough to handle the stress of new regulations, that Jason was up for a promotion at the firm and couldn't be distracted by inventory emergencies, that the patients only trusted me, that I was the only one who knew the inventory software password and the name of the reliable delivery driver and the exact day to stay. She did not say, "Please stay." She said, "Margaret's always been our foundation." I unpacked my suitcases. The studio went to a nurse named Priya, who worked the pediatric floor. I watched her carry a fern into the building from the train window. I stayed for 3 more years. At 29, I met someone. His name was Marcus. He taught high school biology and laughed at my jokes about drug interactions, a laugh that made other people in the coffee shop turn to look. We dated for 11 months. He had a small house with a porch swing and a dog that tolerated me. He wanted me to move in with him after the school year ended. I wanted to. But the March inventory was due, and the vaccine refrigerator had a temperature fluctuation that required daily check-ins with the repair company because my father had chosen the cheapest bid. My mother had started introducing Marcus as Margaret's friend from the hospital even after I corrected her twice at Sunday dinner. Marcus asked me once directly why my brother's name was on the LLC paperwork when I was the one who handled every crisis. I did not have an answer that sounded sane outside my own head. I said I was helping the family. He looked at me for a long time. He left after 13 months. Not dramatically. No slam doors. He just stopped asking me to choose him. I did not blame him. I had not chosen him. I had chosen the inventory counts, the vaccine logs, the family that needed me to be available for 9 years. Visual, a state board seminar, a stack of pamphlets, a notepad. The mechanism was born in a state board seminar I attended alone on a Tuesday night in January. I was 33. The state had passed a new Pharmacy Practice Act, effective January 1st, requiring every licensed pharmacy to have a pharmacist in charge who held a current license from the state board and who was the designated manager of record for all controlled substance documentation. The license required a doctoral degree, a national exam, and a state jurisprudence test. Jason had never taken it. He had never intended to. I had passed the NAPLEX in 2016 after a patient questioned a dosing interaction, and I realized I needed legal standing to make clinical decisions under my own license. I passed on the first attempt. My license number was PIC 2000, 16,421. I was the only person in my family who could legally manage the pharmacy under the new act. The state clerk explained that existing designations would expire on March 15th unless renewed with the licensed pharmacist's signature and a notarized affidavit of active management. I sat in the back row with a notepad and wrote down every deadline. Jason sat at home, watching a basketball game. My mother had asked me to go because, as she said, I was the one who understood that kind of thing. She did not ask what the act meant. She assumed I would handle it. She was correct. But I understood something else that night. The act created a paper trail. It required the state to keep a public record of the pharmacist in charge, and it allowed any licensed pharmacist to file a change of designation with 30 days' notice, provided they could demonstrate they had been performing the duties. I had 9 years of prescription logs, inventory audits, and inspection reports with my signature on them. I had a lever. It was boring. It was legal. It was mine. Visual. A pharmacy window. A neon open sign. A framed newspaper article. The erasure did not happen all at once. It accrued like interest on a debt no one intended to pay. In January of my 34th year, a local business journal featured Jason as the visionary pharmacist behind Chen Family Drugs' community renaissance. The photographer shot him in the pharmacy, wearing a white coat with his name embroidered, holding a mortar and pestle over a display of vitamins. The white coat was my coat. The mortar and pestle was a prop from the window display. The article quoted him at length about his philosophy of patient care. He spoke for 12 minutes, without mentioning a single drug interaction, a single insurance rejection, or the fact that the refrigeration unit had been failing for 3 weeks, and I had been logging temperatures every 4 hours to keep the vaccines compliant. My mother framed the article. My father sent the link to every relative. I was mentioned once in the final paragraph as the dedicated pharmacy support that keeps the shelves stocked. I read it while counting hydrocodone, the gloves still on my hands. By then, the form was already sitting in a file downtown waiting. I just hadn't decided if I would use it. Visual. A bank lobby, a glass conference room, a business card. The second incident happened 2 weeks later. My mother asked me to accompany Jason to the bank to help him organize the financials for the buyer's review. She said it casually, while folding prescription bags, as if she were asking me to pick up milk. I brought my laptop, my external drive, and a binder of records I had maintained for 9 years. Every temperature log, pressed flat. Every inventory sheet, annotated in the margins, with lot numbers and expiration dates. The loan officer, a woman named Denise with silver hair and a charcoal suit, asked Jason about the pharmacy license. Jason, Kate, you. He looked at me. I answered. I explained the standing orders, the vaccination protocol, the controlled substance documentation, and the insurance reconciliation process for the last 3 audits. Denise turned to me, genuinely impressed, and asked if I was the pharmacist in charge. Jason laughed. It was a sound I knew well, the laugh he used when he was uncomfortable and wanted to reclaim the room. He said I was his assistant, that I helped out with the routines, that he was the proprietor, but he liked to keep his sister busy. He said it like a joke between professionals. Meng. Denise did not laugh. She looked at me for 1 second longer than was polite. I looked at the binder. I had color-coded the inventory histories by quarter. I had highlighted the $16,247 in personal funds I had advanced to cover wholesaler bills during the 8-month slump in 2022, the months Jason had been in Napa. I had not listed those advances as loans. I had listed them as operational support in the ledger, language that made them sound voluntary. Jason signed the bank disclosure forms with a pen I had brought from my apartment. My name appeared nowhere on the documents, not even as a witness. Denise handed him her business card. She did not hand me one. I drove home in silence while Jason talked about the boat he might buy with his share, a 22-foot center console he had already picked out online. I stared at the road and thought about the State Board Act. I thought about my license number. I'm 421. I thought about how easy it would be to file a single form with a notary public and a postage stamp. How easy and how permanent. Visual. A state board office. A notary stamp pressing into paper. I filed the form on February 14th. I took a personal day from the pharmacy, the first one I had used in 14 months. I told no one. No, not my mother. Not Jason. Not the technician who covered my station. I drove to the state board office with a folder of proof. 9 years of prescription logs with my signature as the verifying pharmacist, inventory audits paid from my personal account, inspection reports prepared by my hand, and my license card, laminated in plastic. The clerk was a man named Harold, with reading glasses on a chain and a cough that rattled in his chest. He reviewed the documents for 11 minutes without speaking. He said the change of pharmacist in charge would be processed within 5 business days, and the new certificate would be mailed to the address on file. I gave him my apartment address, not the family house on Maple Street. He did not ask why. He stamped the form with a sound like a door closing and handed me a carbon copy. I paid the $40 filing fee with my own debit card. I kept the receipt. I had already mailed the form. It was sitting in a file downtown, waiting. Then I went to the post office and sent a certified letter to the buyer's attorney, Patricia Vance, whose name I had found on the acquisition firm's website under due diligence team. Visual. A post office counter, a certified mail receipt. The letter was 1 page, single-spaced, with no greeting beyond the formal address. It stated that as of March 1st, the designated pharmacist in charge of record for Chen Family Drugs, LLC, had changed pursuant to State Act 14B, and that any sale, inspection, or transfer of management rights required my signature and physical presence by state law. I did not threaten. I did not plead. I did not explain my reasons. I stated facts in the flattest language I knew, the language of regulators and clerks. I kept the certified mail receipt with its tracking number. I kept the stamped copy of the filing. I kept the $40 receipt in an envelope labeled CFD. Administrative. I went home and made a cup of tea and sat on my couch and waited for March 12th. The family did not know. They were planning the brunch menu. They were planning the sale. They were planning to hand me the napkins and ask me to check the cream. Visual. A hotel conference room, a silver coffee service, a pastry display. March 12th arrived cold and bright, a morning that felt like a promise no one asked for. My mother had rented the conference room at the hotel because she said it impressed buyers, gave them a sense of the professionalism they were buying into, care that came from attention to detail. There were white tablecloths and a silver coffee service and a platter of pastries from the bakery Jason liked, the one that charged $6 for a croissant. I arrived at 10:45, wearing a navy dress I had bought for a conference 3 years ago and never worn because my mother had called that morning to say my father was having a bad day, and could I please check the blood pressure machine in the consultation room? My mother kissed my cheek and told me to make sure the cream was fresh and to set out the sugar cubes, not the packets, because Jeffrey Whitfield was a man who noticed detail. Jason wore a navy suit that cost more than my monthly rent, the suit he had bought with the bonus from his firm after I had covered the property taxes that December. My father stood by the window practicing his handshake in the glass reflection, his palm opening and closing like a fish gasping. The buyer arrived at 11 o'clock exactly. His name was Jeffrey Whitfield. He was 60, maybe 65, with a tan that looked expensive and a watch that caught the light and held it like a threat. He brought his attorney, Patricia Vance, a black woman in a burgundy blazer, who carried a leather folio and did not smile when she shook Jason's hand. She looked at me as she entered the room. I was standing by the coffee station. Oh, I nodded. She nodded back. It was a small movement, barely visible, but it held weight I could feel in my collarbone. My mother poured the coffee into china cups. I did not touch the pot. I did not move to help her. Jason launched into his presentation, a slideshow on a laptop I had configured for him the night before. The slides I had designed with the financial charts I had compiled from 9 years of data. He talked about cash flow. He talked about patient retention. He talked about his hands-on management style and his personal relationships with the physicians. He had met 2 physicians in 9 years. I had met all of them. My mother beamed at him like he was a photograph she had always wanted to frame. My father nodded along, his eyes watery with pride or wine. Patricia Vance took notes with a fountain pen that scratched against the paper. She asked one question while Jason was mid-sentence about projected yields. Who holds the current pharmacist-in-charge license for this facility? Jason waved his hand as if brushing away a fly. I oversee all of that, he said. My sister helps with the paperwork, but I'm the proprietor on every document. Patricia Vance stopped writing. She looked at me again, her eyes level and calm. I was still holding my manila envelope. My fingers were not shaking. Visual, a china cup, a fountain pen resting on a legal pad. Jason's answer hung in the air like smoke from a blown candle. Jeffrey Whitfield smiled, a smile that meant he was ready to move to numbers, to cap rates and closing dates, the part of the meeting where men like him felt most at home. My mother filled the silence before it could become awkward. Margaret's always been our foundation, she said, turning to Jeffrey with a hostess's grace, as if she were explaining why the napkins matched the curtains, or why the flowers were white. She's been doing the day-to-day for, 9 years now, she laughed, a sound like silverware settling. We always say she's the engine and Jason is the steering wheel. My father chuckled into his coffee. Jason straightened his tie and let the metaphor sit there. Let it grow roots in the room. Jeffrey Whitfield looked at me with a new expression, the look of a man who has just been told where the bathroom is, a brief acknowledgement before returning to the important people. Patricia Vance did not look at me. She looked at Jason with the flat patience of someone who has heard this particular lie before. Mr. Wilde, you want a cup of towel? Chen, she said, her voice even and unhurried. Are you stating that you personally hold the state pharmacy license, required under Act 14B? Jason's smile faltered for half a second, a crack in the glaze. I hold the management title, he said. The license is a formality. My sister took the exams, but I run the business. I make the decisions. My mother touched Jeffrey Whitfield's arm, a gesture of reassurance. Margaret's always been our foundation, she said. Why would we change that? The phrase again. The exact words, delivered with the same casual cruelty as the day she had denied me the science fair ribbon, the same dismissive music as the night she had kept me from the studio apartment. I felt them land in my sternum like a bookmark placed in a chapter I had already read 100 times and was now ready to close. Patricia Vance closed her folio. The snap of leather was the only sound in the room for 2 full seconds. Jeffrey Whitfield looked at his attorney, confused, his smile dimming. My mother was still talking about my thoroughness, my reliability, my availability, the way I never took vacations and answered my phone at midnight. She was selling my labor as a feature of the pharmacy, like a new counter, or a renovated consultation room, or a reliable blood pressure machine. Jason joined in, explaining that I would of course stay on through the transition, that I was part of the package, that the buyer would find me invaluable, that he had already factored my continued management into the pro forma. He said it without asking me. He said it as if he were offering a tool that came with the building, a pill counter or a waiting room chair. I set my envelope on the table. The sound was soft, paper against cloth. It was enough. Visual, a manila envelope, a hand sliding documents across mahogany. I need to correct the record, I said. My voice was level even, the same tone I used when telling a patient that their insurance would not cover a brand name substitution. I had practiced the sentence in my car on the drive over, speaking it to the steering wheel until it sounded like weather, like a forecast, like something that simply was. I opened the envelope. The flap made a clean, tearing sound. I slid the first document across the table to Patricia Vance. It was the certified copy of the change of pharmacist in charge form, filed with the State Board on February 14th, and processed on March 1st, bearing the clerk's stamp and my signature in blue ink. This is the change of pharmacist in charge form, I said, filed with the State Board on February 14th and processed on March 1st. The previous designation of Jason Chen was terminated by operation of Act 14B, which requires the licensed pharmacist to be the designated manager of record. I slid the second document. It was my pharmacy license number P8 2016-4421, issued 8 years ago, current through next December, with my photograph laminated in the corner. This is my pharmacy license, I said. Number P8 2016 4021. I passed the NAPLEX in 2016. I passed on the first attempt. Now the My brother has never held a pharmacy license. I slid the third document, a spreadsheet printed on green paper. This is a ledger of operational contributions from my personal funds to Chen Family Drugs, LLC, over the last 9 years, I said, totaling $16,247. None of these have been repaid. None were documented as loans in the LLC operating agreement. They were drawn from my personal savings to cover inventory shortfalls, emergency repairs, and insurance premium delinquencies that occurred when the LLC account was empty. Jason laughed. It was a high, nervous sound, the laugh of a child caught in a lie he thought was too small to matter. Margaret, what is this? He said. Are you having some kind of episode? My mother looked at my father, her eyes wide and wet. My father looked at the documents as if they were written in a language he had never learned to read, his mouth slightly open, his hand hovering over his chest. I did not look at any of them. I looked at Patricia Vance. She was reading the filing with a concentration that excluded the rest of the room, her finger moving down the page line by line. She turned to Jeffrey Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, she said, her voice carrying the weight of her 15 years of practicing law, according to the Secretary of State filing and the State Board records, which I verified this morning. Miss Chen has been the certified pharmacist in charge since March 1st. Mr. Dahl. Chen has no active pharmacy license on file. Under the Purchase Agreement's Representation and Warranties Clause, This constitutes a material misrepresentation in the sale disclosures. The buyer is entitled to terminate due diligence immediately. Jeffrey Whitfield's face changed. The tan did not look expensive anymore. It looked like a mask that had slipped. "Jason," he said, "is this true? You told me you ran this operation personally?" Jason stood up. His chair scraped the floor with a sound like a scream. "She's my sister," he said, his voice rising. "She works for me. This is a family misunderstanding. She's upset about the sale, that's all. She's emotional." Patricia Vance did not look up from the ledger. She turned a page. "Ms. Chen," she said, "did you file this change of designation independently without coercion?" "I did," I said. "Did you personally perform the management duties listed in the affidavit of active management?" "For 9 years," I said. "Every prescription, every controlled substance log, every DA audit, every 3 a.m. call from a patient with a refrigeration question." My mother made a sound, not quite a word, more like air escaping a tire. My father's hand was shaking. He knocked over his coffee cup. The brown liquid spread across the white linen, like a map of something breaking open. Jason was shouting now, something about loyalty, about blood, about how I had embarrassed him in front of a client, how I had sabotaged the family. His voice was the only loud thing in the room, bouncing off the hotel walls. I did not raise mine. I did not stand. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the last document, a single sheet of plain paper. "This is my resignation from all informal and formal management duties related to Chen Family Drugs LLC," I said. "Effective immediately. I am terminating my access to the pharmacy management software, the LLC supplier accounts, and the insurance portal. I am also notifying all patients and physicians that all future communications should be directed to the proprietor on file, as listed with the Secretary of State." I placed it on the table next to the spreading coffee stain. Jeffrey Whitfield stood up. He did not look at Jason. He looked at me, and then at Patricia Vance, and then he picked up his own folio. "I think we're done here," he said. My mother reached for my arm. "Yes, you turned too." I moved my chair back. "Margaret," she said. "Margaret, please." I looked at her. I looked at the coffee spreading across the table. I looked at Jason, who was still standing, his face red, his hands open and empty. I picked up my empty envelope. I walked out of the room. No one followed me. Not then. I stopped. Foundations can be moved. Visual, a laptop screen, a red login error message. Don't. I did not go home. I went to my apartment and changed into jeans and a sweatshirt and sat on my couch with a cup of tea that I let cool while I worked. Then I began the withdrawal. I changed the password on the pharmacy management software. The account was in my name, paid for with my personal credit card for the last 4 years, because Jason said the LLC couldn't afford the $89 monthly fee, and my father had agreed. I canceled the auto-renewal. I exported the patient database to my personal external drive and deleted the master file from the shared cloud folder. I logged into the LLC bank account, which I had accessed for 9 years because I was the one who balanced the transactions and caught the errors, and I removed my authorized user status through the online portal. The bank sent an automatic notification to the primary account holder, my father, that a user had been removed, and that pending transactions might be affected. I did not answer my phone when it rang 30 minutes later, my mother's name bright on the screen. I let it ring until the voicemail picked up. I changed the outgoing message on the pharmacy line, the number I had carried in my pocket for 9 years, to a generic message directing all calls to Jason's cell phone, which he never answered before noon. Then I stopped. I had not destroyed anything. I had not hidden information they could not legally obtain. I had simply stopped holding the door open with my shoulder. The machine began to break immediately, the way a clock stops when you stop winding it. Without the software, Jason could not access the patient contact information to schedule the inspection Jeffrey Whitfield had demanded before closing, nor could he prove the inventory accuracy he had claimed. Without my signature on the insurance forms, the broker could not renew the liability policy, which was due in 17 days, and which I had prepared every quarter for 9 years. Without my personal funds covering the gap between the insurance reimbursements and the wholesaler bills, the March auto draft bounced for the first time in 4 years, triggering a late fee of $230 and a notice of default risk from the lender. I did not cause these things. I simply stopped preventing them. I stopped oiling the machine. Visual. A phone screen. 7 missed calls. A kitchen table at night with 1 lamp on. The fallout took 2 weeks to fully arrive, spreading like water, finding every crack in a floor. Jeffrey Whitfield terminated the purchase agreement on March 14th, citing material misrepresentation and failure to disclose the true management structure. The acquisition firm's attorney sent a formal notice to Jason, copied to my father, outlining the discrepancies in the financial disclosures, the lack of licensed management, and the $16,247 in undocumented liability. The bank, alerted by the bounce draft and the late fee, called the commercial loan due for review and required a full financial audit before the next payment cycle. My father left me 4 voicemails, each one louder than the last. Jason left 11, the first 3 demanding, the next 4 pleading, the last 4 consisting mostly of silence and breathing. My mother left 3 that started with "How could you do this to your father?" and ended with "We need to talk as a family." I listened to none of them past the first 30 seconds. I deleted them one by one while eating toast at my kitchen counter. The accountant, a man named Gene, who had prepared the family taxes for a decade, and who had always emailed me directly because I was the one who provided the numbers, called me on March 20th. He was not angry. He was confused in a professional way, the way a surgeon might be confused if the patient walked out in the operation. He said he could not file the LLC return without the inventory documentation, the purchase receipts, and the depreciation schedules, which had always come from me in a green folder by the 15th of the month. I told him to contact Jason. I told him Jason was the proprietor. He paused. I could hear him clicking his pen. "Margaret," he said, his voice dropping. "Jason doesn't know the password to the accounting software. He doesn't even know which version we're running." "I know," I said. Visual. A health inspector's clipboard. A refrigerator thermometer. The state board inspector called Jason directly to schedule the compliance interview he was legally required to attend as the proprietor of record before the March 15th deadline. Jason did not know what a compliance interview entailed. He did not know the inspector's name was Roberto Santos. He did not know that the vaccine refrigerator had a failing compressor. The technician had reported to me 2 months prior, which I had been meshing with Ming Paste with a personal space heater and twice daily temperature checks because my father had refused to pay the $800 repair, saying we could wait until spring. The inspector found the refrigerator at 52 degrees during his routine walkthrough. He issued a notice of violation and an order to discard all temperature-sensitive inventory. The fine was $500. The repair estimate was $2,000, and the vaccine supplier threatened to withhold credit until the violation was cleared. My father called me again, this time from the urgent care clinic. His blood pressure was 190/110. He said the stress was killing him, that I was killing him, that a daughter should not do this to her family. I told him to call Jason. I told him Jason was the proprietor. I told him Jason would handle it. I was calm. I was unbothered. I was free. Visual. A smartphone. 3 gray text bubbles on a screen. The phone calls slowed after a month, tapering like a tide going out, and leaving things exposed on the sand. Then they changed. My mother called on a Tuesday in April and left a voicemail. I did not return for 3 days, not out of spite, but because I was busy learning how to live without the sound of her voice in my ear. She said my father was fine, the blood pressure was managed with medication, and that they had hired a relief pharmacist to handle the prescriptions because Jason couldn't do it and work full-time at the firm. She said the pharmacist fees were eating into the profits, that he charged $120 an hour, which was highway robbery. She said Jason was struggling at the firm because of the stress from the sale falling through, that he had been passed over for the promotion he wanted. She did not apologize. She did not say she had been wrong. She said, "We miss you at dinner. Sunday isn't the same." I did not call back. I texted 2 days later. "I'm glad he's well. Take care." That was all. She did not text again. My father texted me in May. It was the first time he had texted me in 3 years, since he had sent me a picture of a sunrise that I had never asked for. The message was 3 sentences, written in the slow, punctuated style of a man who still treats texting like a telegram. "I didn't know it was that bad. I thought you were helping because you wanted to. I should have asked." I read it sitting on my porch in the evening, the concrete still warm from the day. I read it 3 times. It was not an apology. It was a flicker, a small light in a dark room, enough to see the outline of something broken, but not enough to mend it, not enough to make it whole. I did not reply that day. I let the words sit with me. I replied the next morning while my coffee brewed. "Thank you for saying that." He did not write back. I did not expect him to. Now wanted. I did not know job all. I'm a star big cow. Some doors once opened only show you the distance between where you are and where you used to be. Visual. A studio apartment, a bookshelf with 12 books, a green mug, got one. I live in a 1-bedroom now, 10 blocks from the hospital where I work as a clinical pharmacist, where I was promoted to senior pharmacist in April because I could finally stay late without a patient calling about a missing refill. I have a fern on the windowsill that I water on Saturdays, and it has grown 3 new fronds since I bought it in April. I have a green mug that I bought with my first paycheck after the reckoning, the first thing I had ever purchased just because I liked the color, not because it was on sale or because someone else needed it. I wake up early, without an alarm. I make coffee in the green mug. I read the newspaper at my small table, without checking my phone for prescription emergencies or LLC bank alerts. On Sundays, I go to the farmer's market 3 streets over and buy vegetables I have never cooked before. Eggplant and fennel and strange mushrooms. And I burn them sometimes. And I eat them anyway because they are mine. And because no one is watching. I am learning to be alone without being lonely. It is slow. It is uneven. It is enough. My name is Margaret. I am 34.